is Mediaweek.
Hello and welcome to the program. We're going to be taking a special look today at the Today FM royal prank call tragedy, the international controversy overshadowing the final radio ratings for the year. We'll also look at the NRL digital rights deal and James Packer moving into movies. But first, to the news that the broadcast regulator, the ACMA, has launched a formal investigation into the Today FM royal prank call. It's going to focus on whether the station complied with its licence conditions. This comes ahead of an inquest in London into the death of the nurse who was duped by presenters Mel Gregg and Michael Christian in the call to the hospital where the Duchess of Cambridge was being treated. Well, let's get some initial analysis from our co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek. James, obviously, I mean, this story is just a tragedy from start to finish. ACMA now, with this investigation, a fast-tracking too of the investigation.
Sure, yeah. So it's just been over a week since the call was made, the developments over the weekend, the death of the nurse in London, and here we are with at the stage of announcing an investigation. Different ways ACMA can get involved. They can act on complaints, they can act under instruction from the minister, or they can act on their own initiative, what they call, I think, as their own investigation. That's what they've done here. So they're not going to be talking, not going to say anything now. They're just going to get on with the investigation.
Looking at this, we did see Today FM, there were some sponsors pulled out advertising at the weekend. Today FM then took the position of suspending all advertising. It's restarted now with profits from that going
and using the money from those with a minimum sort of guarantee, if you like, of $500,000 will go to the family in the UK. And I think that's through until the end of the year. That situation will continue.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get some more on this now. And we're joined by Tim McDermott, the former General Manager of Sydney radio stations 2UE and Nova 96.9. And from our Melbourne studio, Bob Peters, Media Analyst at Global Media Analysis. Bob, if we could start with you, and we just thought we should just point out to viewers that you did have a long commercial association with Southern Cross and Austereo before the merger, though not now.
That's right.
Okay, so just to disclose that, well, let's get into this. I mean, the ACMA's launched this investigation. How unusual do you think it is for it to kind of launch this investigation themselves rather than in response to a complaint? I mean, and is this fast-tracking, I guess, the right thing to do?
Well, I suppose the action was in response to a fairly unusual and unique set of tragic and unfortunate circumstances. So fortunately, there aren't many precedents to go by, and this is a once-off situation, very unfortunate, and I suppose given the high profile both here and in the UK, indeed around the world, ACMA probably felt that it was better to act sooner rather than later.
Tim, I mean, obviously in managing radio teams, just how involved would a general manager get in content matters, or is it kind of left in the hands of the content executives?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. In FM radio, there's not a lot of involvement because there's quite a good structure of people in terms of content, with a group content person, a local content person, and often assistant local content person. So the general manager doesn't have to get involved as much, remembering that, you know, in the FM radio, the talk component of the hour is about 5 minutes, so there's not a lot of risk in that 5 minutes an hour, whereas in talkback it's up to 50 minutes an hour where the guys are talking. So the general manager is very involved in talkback radio and very close to it because there's so much that can go wrong. So yeah, it's very different both sides of the fence, and obviously I've done both.
James, what do you think? And I mean, where to next in this? I mean, is there a chance that, you know, Today FM's licence could be taken over?
That's certainly one of the things that can happen. You know, they've already got some conditions on their licence. You've got to think that's possibly the most likely thing. There'll be some more conditions on their licence. They can get suspended. There can be a suspension on the licence. And the most drastic move, I guess, would be if they actually lost their licence. You know, that punishes a whole lot of people as well as just the actual owner of the licence, or the employees, associated businesses, etc. So it's hard to see it going that far, I guess.
Bob, your thoughts on that? What do you think? I mean, is there any chance that, you know, Today FM could have more licence conditions imposed on it, or, you know, even that possibility of losing its licence?
I would agree with James's assessment. I don't think any of the actions which have occurred at Today, either recently or earlier in the year, would warrant such dramatic action as loss of a licence at this stage. But I think it is quite possible that further conditions will be put on to make sure that the station, its management, its on-air talent stay on the right side of good taste in the future.
Yeah, Bob, is it right to call Today FM a repeat offender here? Because you look down the list of ACMA investigations over the last decade and they feature pretty significantly.
Yeah, I suppose they've been drawn into the spotlight more than most stations. I suppose it has to do with their sort of cutting-edge comedic humour that sometimes crosses the line. Other stations, indeed other stations within the Southern Cross Stereo group, rarely, if ever, have similar problems. So it's probably a bit of a cultural thing that needs to be twigged, and I'd be confident that the management and the board at Southern Cross Stereo will ensure that that happens, and probably that it happens very quickly indeed.
What do you think about this? I mean, there have been calls for tighter regulation. Even Senator Conroy did seem to sort of push away from that, saying, look, there's an inquiry, you know, just wait, there's a response coming on that. But what are your thoughts?
Look, I think we're tightly controlled as it is. I think there's too much of that. It also comes down to a lot of common sense. I mean, I think really in this situation, I mean, talking to someone who's pregnant and in hospital is probably a no-go zone anyway. And I think there was a lack of common sense in the situation. And I think we shouldn't be penalised as an industry by that. We should learn by it, but we shouldn't be penalised by it.
Has there been the Southern Cross Stereo's opposition in the FM space? It's largely DMG Radio and Australian Radio Network. Have they been able to capitalise on sort of the brand damage done to Southern Cross Stereo this year, either in ratings and ultimately revenue?
Look, I don't know in general, but I did have a conversation yesterday with someone from DMG, and they are very, very busy. So I would suggest there is a bit of a rub-off right now that Stereo are losing money and DMG are picking it up. That said, DMG had some good ratings, so that would help as well. But yeah, I think in the short term it has hurt them, absolutely. But they come back. I mean, look at 2GB with the Alan Jones affair. I mean, they're all back now. It becomes a bit of a storm in a teacup once it blows over, so they'll come back.
Tim, as well, I wanted to ask you too, because there have been calls, you know, that, well, someone was to blame for allowing this to be pre-recorded and then go to air. You know, Southern Cross Stereo has said that it tried to contact the hospital. The hospital says, you know, no contact was eventually made. What do you think? I mean, is someone going to have to take the blame for the call going to air, and will someone have to resign?
Look, that's a really tough question. I think people are looking for a scapegoat. I think that it's just a mistake, and I think the two announcers are young, they're new at the game, they're having a crack. I don't think they meant any harm at all. It just went terribly wrong, and I think we sort of need to take a bit of a deep breath and go, you know, let's just see how this pans out. I think Austereo are moving very positively in how they're handling it, and I think, you know, everyone's just got to cool down a bit. You know, I'd like to know what actually happened in London before all this. I mean, what did the media say when it happened? Because we haven't been reported on that. I mean, what upset that woman's wasn't what we said, was what was going on over there. So it'd be interesting to know what that was.
Yeah, Bob, Macquarie faced a fairly sort of a huge backlash against Alan Jones' comments not that long ago. It seems to have pretty much blown over. You already get the feeling the heat's starting to come out of this a little bit. Do we all sort of move on eventually?
I would think generally we do, unless there is a chronic disregard by the talent involved to continue to breach standards of good taste and decency. But assuming that people do pull their head in and do the right thing, then listeners and then later advertisers pretty quickly will probably come back. And I would certainly expect that would be what would happen to Today as has happened to 2GB recently.
Looking at this, I mean, too, I guess this sort of growing trend of advertisers as activists as well. Bob, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, is this kind of a recent phenomena, do you think, with what we've been seeing this year in terms of 2GB and Today FM, of course, earlier in the year?
Oh, I think it's a very recent event, and I think it's driven largely by the rise, advent and popularity of social media and its ability to be utilised by people who feel they have a grievance, and they've found that they can use social media, galvanise public support and therefore put pressure on advertisers.
Tim, you've worked in sales for a few days, a few years. What did it used to happen when there was an outrage before social media? Did things move a little bit slower? But did you face those sort of similar things though? Trying to have to keep that. I guess you've got that tightrope too. If you want the talent to be edgy, but at the same time they've got to sort of stick within certain guidelines. Yeah,
look, it was very different. I mean, normally it used to be you had to get in writing, official writing to the radio station of a complaint. And that would happen, but obviously it wouldn't happen anywhere near as frequent as now with social media. So I think it is a lot tougher now because it spreads so quickly, and people are very quick to jump on the bandwagon as well. I mean, with someone writing into the station, they had to be very serious if they really wrote a letter to the radio station. Now it's so easy to do it and jump on the bandwagon through Twitter or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a lot harder, but it's the way of the world, I suppose. And you know, we as media operators have just got to be much more mindful of that, and we will lose clients over time, but they come back, as I said before.
And then you were talking obviously before about obviously you've kind of spanned both the talk radio, the FM as well. In terms of having, you know, that in-house legal teams working on this kind of thing, is that pretty important to be, you know, having them working closely with content makers?
Absolutely. Look, in Talkback, it was crucial. I mean, I probably spoke to our in-house legal every day, if not every second day, because there was so much going on. It is apparent in FM radio as well, but probably hasn't been as apparent because you just didn't need it. Whereas I think now, after this, I think all the FM networks will be going, oh, we need to stock up on some lawyers, because it is very handy having them in-house, because you're just a phone call away and you get the results. You know, if you've got outsourcing, sometimes you just can't connect with the people, and we're working on a time frame, you know, all the time. So.
And Bob, we saw at Fairfax Radio, just wondering your thoughts about, they don't seem to have been able to capitalise much on the troubles that 2GB's had in Sydney, certainly not yet. And we've seen in Melbourne their 3RW station very dominant. They've lost Darren Hinch recently. Some sort of thought that maybe, you know, because he was a bit too outspoken, that they didn't see a big future for him.
I must confess, James, I'm not really across the reasons for the departure of Hinch at 3AW. Going back to your earlier point, though, 3AW and 2UE are in very different circumstances. 3AW is the dominant commercial news talk station here in Melbourne, whereas 2UE is very much a number two following a very successful and established 2GB. So the strategies that are required at each of those two stations are quite different in terms of boosting their ratings and maintaining or growing their revenues.
Bob, just in terms of prank calls as well, I mean, we've seen obviously Today FM suspend the prank calls. Do you see them ever happening on FM radio in Australia again?
Look, I'm not an expert on programming. Go back a step. I think that, again, what I've said earlier, cutting-edge comedy has been a very important ingredient in the entertainment mix used by the mainstream commercial music stations. A lot, if indeed not most, of the talent often comes from the stand-up and comedy circuits. And, you know, there is a great spirit of Australian larrikinism and good humour. So I would have thought that I don't think we've probably seen the last of it, but there might be some careful reflection on what the boundaries are and under what circumstances should it be used, and indeed perhaps what sort of releases are received from the people on the other side of the prank call.
And Tim, we get a thought on media management. We've sort of seen that sort of here from the Reece Holleran's press conference on Saturday, when the person they hired introduced him before he spoke to the media, and they've been sort of working it. And there's a lot at stake here, I guess, so you can probably understand why they do that. But can it be overdone at times, do you think? Oh,
look, yeah, obviously it can. But I think in this situation, you know, it was a very, very serious matter. And I think they had to protect themselves as much as they could. And I think they've made a couple of mistakes, but they've made a couple of good moves as well. I mean, it was all so sudden, and who would have picked it, you know, 5:45 on a Saturday morning? So, yeah, I think it was just no one saw it coming at all. And as I said earlier, there was no ill intent from the guys on air, and who would have thought this? I think no one was prepared for it.
Tim, been great to get your insights. Thank you so much for joining us on Media Week. Tim McDermott there. We are going to take a very quick break though. Coming up though, we're going to get some more on the outlook for radio in 2013 after the final ratings survey for the year was out this week.